Hello and welcome to How Church Works. I'm Scott Wylie. This is a podcast where we explore the inner workings of church ministry. And today I want to continue the theme we've been considering the last couple episodes, the impact of the coronavirus, COVID-19, on church ministry. We've been thinking a lot at my church regarding how it is that we communicate as a church body. And in this time when we're still under the guidelines that the government is suggesting, limiting group sizes to 10, that's had a pretty significant impact in our ability not only to gather, but to communicate with each other. Earlier today, several of the pastors got together for a face-to-face meeting. I didn't take a head count, but I think we stayed below 10. I'm pretty sure we stayed below 10. But we also determined today that that would be our last face-to-face meeting of a group that size. There's a lot that we can do using technology and the telephone. And in order to respond responsibly to this crisis, we're going to limit group meetings to the best of our ability. The second thing that we're doing is moving our regular studies online. Over the course of this last week, we've moved most of our women's ministry Bible studies online, and so they're interacting that way. This coming week, we're going to move the men's study online. We have a group that meets early in the morning on Wednesdays. I teach that group, and I've been so busy dealing with other issues that I didn't have time to prepare a lesson and launch that study this week, but that will resume next week. So our regular Bible studies will continue and we'll communicate and share that way, but that will be online. Third, we're launching a new initiative next week where every morning at 9 o'clock a.m., one of the pastors is going to lead our church in corporate prayer over the internet. We're going to do that on Facebook at 9 o'clock a.m. every weekday. And we're using Facebook. I'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but we're going to use Facebook because once we post that video, it will be there the rest of that day. Well, it'll actually be there forever until we delete it. And so people who can't join us at 9 o'clock live can go back and listen to that prayer. But we're going to spend just 2 or 3 minutes every day gathering as a church, spending a couple of moments in God's Word and praying together to start each day. Number 4, each of the various ministries has been working out a plan to stay involved and stay engaged with the people that they serve. I know, for instance, that our student ministry pastor and our college pastor plan to do something online at 9 p.m. on weeknights. So the students in our church will be able to stay engaged with their pastors that way each evening. Our children's pastor is doing the same thing, and that's something that all of the departments are looking at. How is it that we can remain engaged with the people we serve? The fifth thing that we're doing is we are going to be making personal phone calls to everyone who calls our church their church home. The church that I'm a part of is a pretty large church. We have just over 5,000 people who are active as members or attenders of our church, and we have 15 pastors. So we're going to take that list of 5,000 people, we're going to divide it up, and we're simply going to start making phone calls to everyone. It's a great opportunity for our pastors to check in on the congregation, discover any needs that they might have, make sure that they know how to reach us. We're also going to use it as a time to make sure that our records are up to date. Are people getting email from us? Do we have the right address? Or are there any errors in our data that we need to correct? And then we're going to end each of those conversations with a time of prayer if that person is willing and wanting to do that. It's actually something we're pretty excited about. It's going to be a time-consuming process. It'll be well over 300 phone calls for each pastor to make. We're going to start that next week and stay engaged with our congregation that way. And that's in addition to the phone calls and conversations that the pastors are having with the people they directly serve on a regular basis. Those pastors will be in touch as well, but this is something extra that we're going to do just to make sure that every member of our church has that contact and knows how to reach us. Now, one of the things that we've been trying to work through is the fact that we are right now at the time when we need to have an annual business meeting as a church. Our church budget ends the last day of March, and so on April 1, we need to have a new budget in place. We also have some elders and deacons who have been nominated to those offices. And so several of the elders and pastors who are involved in sort of the administrative side of our church are working through the logistics of how is it that we do an online meeting. That's something that we normally do in person, but we're going to be unable to do that this time. So we're going to have an online business meeting, and maybe I'll circle back to that in a future podcast and describe how that went. Now, as far as the logistics, there's really two main platforms that we're using to communicate with our congregation, at least in terms of video. I'd love to hear what your church is doing and hear any suggestions that you have. But the two platforms we've sort of settled into are Zoom, and I'll leave a link to Zoom in the show notes. If you don't have Zoom, Zoom is a very robust online meeting platform where the participants can see each other and talk to each other. We're going to be investing the money to make sure that each of our pastors have a Zoom Pro account. There is a free account, and so you can start using Zoom right away. But the Pro account does a couple of things that we think we're going to need. One is it gives us the ability to record the session, so we'll be able to have an archive of that and post it in other places for people who might have had to miss it at the time. And the other thing it does is it removes the 40-minute time limit for group meetings. The free account allows you to have an unlimited number of one-on-one meetings, but if you're trying to have a meeting with a group, the free account is limited to 40 minutes. I'll leave a link to Zoom, as I said, in the show notes, and you can compare the prices. But Zoom is something we've been using for a while, and we highly recommend it, and our church is using it much more during this time. And the second platform we're using is Facebook Live. The way that we're using Facebook Live is if we need to communicate something that's just one-way communication. If we just need to make an announcement, share a prayer, communicate information, we're using Facebook Live for that. We're using Zoom for the times when we need to interact. So for example, the Bible studies are using Zoom so that the teacher and the students can all be interacting and communicating with each other. We're using Facebook Live for the weekday morning prayers because that's not going to be a time when we're necessarily interacting, but we want the congregation to be able to participate. Well, as I said, I would love to know what your church is doing to stay in touch during a time like this. Please leave your comments or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. If listening to a podcast that describes the inner workings of church ministry interests you, please subscribe. I'm Scott Wylie, and you've been listening to How Church Works.